This is the i3 Business Solutions Cloud Webinar, recorded September 24th, 2013. I've been with i3 in its various iterations over the years for something like 14 years now. And where it's applicable to this conversation is I co-lead the cloud services offering with Tom Hadsma. And Tom is also my co-lead. We have split the workload in terms of designing the offering as well as implementing at our clients. We believe we have gotten pretty good at determining the factors which make a successful cloud implementation as well as watching for road bumps. So at this point, I'll turn the control here over to Tom. Tom.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks for coming today. We have just a brief introduction of myself, and we'll switch back to Andy to go into details. But i3 has been providing total information technology solutions for over 20 years, and we've been dealing with that from the enterprise, big company, medium, and small companies. And that's given us and our folks here, our teams, a unique perspective on IT and the impact specifically of the cloud on our customers. And again, very focused on small and medium business customers. I think it makes sense to try to define the cloud, again, given our perspective of it. Technically speaking, it's sort of based on the internet model. It is decentralized, very highly redundant, and in our case, we're talking about a very secure cloud model. It's also very scalable, up and down. You have sudden requirements. You're adding seasonal staff, for example. You can quickly accommodate those users on the system and scale back down when you don't have the requirement for that. And importantly, related to that, it is metered. And I guess that's a single word for saying you only pay for what you use. So what does that really mean? I think you boil it down, and it's computing and software resources that are delivered on demand as a service. Now, all the things currently in your office, the servers and the phone systems and the wiring closets and the IT guys running around keeping all that stuff alive, all that stuff can be incorporated, can be provided as a service from the cloud. And increasingly, it makes a lot of sense for you to start thinking about that. This is a really exciting opportunity. Enterprise systems, they have huge investments in data centers. Small and medium businesses are much more able to shift to cloud services, take advantage of this opportunity, and get some real benefits and productivity increasement. So I think it's a big screen, all these services we're using on our PCs and on our smartphones and iPhones, the file storage, photo sharing, social media, all those things are essentially cloud services that you're accessing. And as a consumer, these are all great. You can take advantage of these at very low or no cost, and they do a terrific job. There's a lot of innovation, and there's a lot of benefits to providing services with this model. Now, the great thing is all this approach to providing these types of services can now be translated to real business software applications using that same model and running a lot of your core business functions from the cloud itself. More benefits of this and why it may be right for you is if you have a dispersed or diverse workforce where you have a lot of people on the road, where you have multiple office locations and trying to keep communications and everything coherent, you're able to use those smartphones, tablets, iPads, or PCs in the office. Second is the cost savings are significant in a lot of cases because you have lower upfront costs. When you think about it, if you spread out the costs for the software among thousands and millions of users, the net result is that you are going to pay less for that same service instead of getting a server, installing the software license, and paying all that money up front to set things up. So those upfront costs vanish, and you're able to see some significant cost benefits from that. Again, it's very scalable, and because you don't have all the complexity in your office, it's a lot simpler. When we're talking about deployment of business applications within hours and days instead of months and years that we may have seen in the past. So, again, our unique perspective on this is that if you're just looking to save money, you're probably missing the big picture, because the value of the cloud is be able to take some existing business functions, trying to grow those and improve productivity and improve integration much more quickly and more flexibly than you've been able to do in the past. So you can't really get there with a traditional IT model and trying to do everything yourself in-house. So you need this technology. We want to talk about specifics on perhaps entry points for you to start thinking about. And with that, I will hand it back to Andy, and he'll go into details about these opportunities.
Yep, thanks, Tom. The goal we had several goals in designing the solution. And when I say the solution, what I'm referring to is the ability to transform an office, an SMB office, into a cloud infrastructure. So we're not, and while we do that, we are not going to disrupt what is currently at the office. So we would like to offer clients the ability to move to a cloud design, but not to impact operations or make things worse for obvious reasons. We had to keep a lot in mind in terms of performance and client needs and user expectations, because we do believe that's the reason we're talking right now. We do believe that a cloud infrastructure does bring a lot of benefits, but it's because we are talking about changing the infrastructure of the office, there are differences compared to traditional setups. So we need to highlight those. The goals are, though, that for end users and administrators, we do want everything to be simpler, easier, better, and more scalable. Those come back to you in terms of both administrative costs as well as financial expenditures. So we said, all right, what is the ideal in a perfect world if we could magically push a button and move an office, generic office, to the cloud? What are we talking about doing? We're taking a business and we're talking about a business's files, their communications infrastructure, and the rest of the pieces that make an office work. And we are dealing with each one of those pieces as a separate module. So our solution, as I said, is intended to move an entire office to the cloud, and we have done this. But what happens usually is clients break this apart into pieces because they may say, for whatever reason, they don't want phones to move to the cloud. They have something else in place, etc. Okay, we can take pieces and parts and figure out what is most applicable to that office. We'll start with file sync. Here we're talking about the user's files, your shared files, what would normally be on a shared drive in a folder. Because if we're talking about the cloud, if we're moving these files elsewhere, in some instances, we no longer need to have an end server. We no longer need to have a server controlling the environment. Behind the scenes, this could mean no Active Directory because that is handled in a different way. It could mean that if you have a server which primary primary duty is to be a file server. Well, let's get rid of that. Let's offload the other services onto other equipment and just deal with file synchronization and give the users the information they need. Next, we have communications. You can think of that primarily email, but also voice, video, text conferencing. That's a separate identifiable piece. So we have servers. Assume, all right, we do have file storage needs, but we also have maybe application hosting, database hosting needs. What am I going to do with that? Well, we can bring those servers into the cloud. Phones are a separate issue. Think of these as the office phones, the phones the landlines that make your business work, including fax machines or fax lines as well. But we're talking about a transition from a traditional phone system to a cloud-based voice over IP phone system. And that does not necessarily mean just voice over IP, because we have other providers who will say, who will give you, yes, this is a voice over IP system, but we're also going to throw more equipment into your office. Our goal is to get rid of that kind of implementation. We don't want unnecessary hardware in the office. We want to say that's going to be offloaded elsewhere. We don't want to put any prerequisite or any unnecessary requisites on your office in terms of making that a choke point for performance or stability. And with all of the above, yes, there are best practices that we recommend you have for just the basic cabling and the hardware and everything else that makes the pieces in your office talk to the other pieces. So that infrastructure module is determined by the needs of the previous 4 modules. As we've implemented, we do get a lot of common concerns from people, and we are trying to itemize them here for you. There's been a few more, but these are the big ones that often come up. Data security, encryption, my data is elsewhere. It's no longer in my office, and that worries me. Well, yes, that's understandable. We are able to get down to the level where we can say your data between point A and point B is encrypted. The data stream cannot be interpreted by anybody else who may be sniffing that information. When it gets to point B, that point B repository is also secured. One common concern these days is medical environments, HIPAA compliance. We do have our vendors, the cloud-based vendors, do meet compliance requirements from HIPAA and are happy to sign papers, etc. But the point is those target environments are designed to be completely standalone and containing your data from any other data that may be there. And the traffic, the in-transit information is also encrypted. It is a safe environment. Next, the data ownership. That kind of goes in with security. If I'm giving my data to another organization, how do I know what happens if that organization disappears the next day? Without getting into too much technical detail, there are safeguards in place to prevent against that happening, both internally that we can design as well as redundancies that are built into that infrastructure. The pricing model is, when we were designing the solution, we did realize that this is a huge factor, pricing. We don't want to, we can promise the sky, but also charge you the equivalent price. That's not the goal here. It needs to be something that is competitive with an internal in-house solution. And as we look at that, there is the next line, the cost to value comparison. Well, we have a company who may have an in-house data center who's considering offloading that workload to the cloud. Is that appropriate? I'll get into that in more detail in the next slide. Another concern is, what about just my traditional environment? What's wrong with it? A common question, or a more common question from that, is backup. And we aren't knocking traditional environments necessarily, but what we would like to show you here are the benefits to moving to a cloud solution. I put backup specifically in there, though, because backups are often a solution we need to be careful with. If we have a file server, or if we have an important server being backed up, how is it being backed up? What is the recovery time of that data in case something happens? And what is the recovery time of the server in case something happens? Traditional backups like tape or backup to USB they work, but in terms of recovering from a disaster, it could be easily days before a server is back up and functional, depending on the type of disaster. The cloud solution has it inherently built into the solution where your data is not only being backed up regularly, but if there is a problem, essentially a new copy of that data of that server can be spun up. You push a button and you have a new instance of that environment back online. And it's almost as simple as I said, pushing a button, and it certainly takes a lot less time than having to acquire new hardware, reload an operating system, reload your backup solution, restore your environment, and then make sure that your environment you're going to have to reconfigure the environment to work with whatever you're restoring it to. Just listing those things to illustrate the complexity of the recovery of a traditional backup solution. So that leads us to the list of, all right, what are the flags to watch out for? Count your servers. We have, at some point, the server cost to purchase and maintain in-house will be cheaper than the cost to offload your server environments elsewhere. This is generally a very high number, and it is not something that we often see in the SMB marketplace, but we still, for due diligence here, we wanted to get that information out there. I'm not going to give an actual number because this is when we have to sit down and do the math and figure out what the needs are in terms of performance for the servers and what the before and after picture would look like. This is part of the analysis that we do with our cloud consulting. Another flag is, all right, you have specialized performance needs. Every once in a while, you may have a application, a database that says, I need to have no slowdown on my hardware. I need to be run in a native, a native environment. No virtualization just because of the hardware hit or the costs or other unforeseen aspects may force us to use a certain type of environment. Depending on the physical infrastructure, there may be limitations in place. This all comes down to performance needs. The cloud-based solution does allow very, very high scaling for performance needs. But the fact is that a virtual environment does not run as quickly as a native environment that is loaded directly on a server without a virtual platform between it. Again, this is more specialized. This is more higher end. We don't generally see this in the SMB marketplace, but still, that is a reason why a cloud offering could throw up a flag in certain instances. Also with storage, assume we have terabytes of data. The data that you save in an environment is charged on a monthly basis per the amount of data that you are storing, generally. There's tiers that you move up and down into, but the fact is you are paying for somebody else to hold your data, and you have to pay for that. So if you're a smaller office, if you have not a lot of budget, but you have a lot of data, again, we're talking terabytes and up, then that cost of just simply storing that data may not work with your budget. Another aspect, all right, we have a lot of data. We have a internet service provider with a accept what we think is an acceptable bandwidth. Well, that may or may not be acceptable depending on how much data you need to push over that line, what the solutions that we put in place are. Are we synchronizing data with a file sync solution? Are we talking to servers online through remote desktop? What are we doing? And how much data, how much bandwidth is that going to consume? And then based on your office itself, if you have a critical application, if you have a critical environment, high availability, and you just cannot go down, then we need to talk about things like ISP redundancy. Maybe you want to consider fiber internet versus more traditional, lower reliability methods. So those are the flags to watch out for, but the goal here is to either understand those flags and deal with them, or to say certain modules may not be applicable to your environment. But the fact is, to reiterate the benefits that we're trying to grab here, we are talking about access from any device, from any user. This could be anything from having a mobile client base, people are on the road a lot, to decentralizing the importance of any particular office. We have some clients with a lot of offices or more than one, and they don't want to be tied to things breaking at a single office and having that populate to the other offices. Each office can be independent. Each user can be independent from an IT infrastructure point of view. Cost savings and lower upfront costs, just the model of the cloud offerings are such that, yes, there are often cloud savings, both from the hardware acquisition point of view, capital expenditures, as well as the softer costs. Think electricity, administrative overhead, and just paying for services. Software licensing is also a good identifier to start itemizing your savings, because depending on the number of servers you have and the back-end infrastructure, that is a potentially significant savings aspect. If we're talking scalable, we need to be able to grow and also shrink our environment on demand. We need to, if we have a need where we know we are doing a lot of processing, we'll need a lot of storage, or a lot of CPU cranking on a particular server during a busy season, we can turn that up on demand without really impacting operations. We can then turn it off on demand and scale the server down so we can pay less for that environment. So this all comes down to a simpler environment. I'm not going to read that whole line there, but that's one of our goals of doing this. We want to shrink the IT footprint at any particular location, both in terms of physical hardware and the effort it takes to maintain it and pay for it. Last line item, things are faster. We can now just push buttons and spin up servers on demand, turn a service on demand without having to do hardware acquisition, loading, and customizing that environment. So I hope I've made it clear that the aspects that i3 brings to the table are specific solutions. Yes, we can talk about Office 365, for example, and other cloud-based applications, cloud-based services. But the more we've been doing this, the more we realize that's not all that needs to be done. We have seen clients move into situations that are simply not appropriate for them. So what we want to do as a starting step is to evaluate whatever you currently are working on and see if it's best for you, see if it'll actually work for your environment. And if it comes to that point, you say give the go-ahead button, then yes, i3 can implement as needed. But our goal here is to provide a full coverage cloud consulting. Now, at this point, yeah, let's move it to a Q&A. Again, if you would like this presentation, if you would like the Q&A answers, or if I'm unable to answer anything right now, I will consolidate everything into a presentation that you can request on demand. Send an email to cloud@i3bus.com, and you'll receive it after this meeting. So at this point, anybody, if you'd like to chat your questions, feel free. Just send a note to me, and we're watching the screen right now. And Tom, what do you got?
Just got a note from Catherine. I see a simple question. Can you tell us more about the phone systems in the cloud? What do those really do compared to traditional phone systems in the office?
Sure. To summarize their impact, I would say think of it as a much lower footprint, as well as integration to other services. So, for example, we have a solution that says install this in the office. We will get rid of a lot of unnecessary hardware that I spoke about before, where maybe a traditional or a more traditional voice over IP solution would still require some voice over IP management hardware in the office, and this is not necessary in our instance, because we can then really just say you do need to have a fast backbone. Your back-end systems in the office need to be able to support voice over IP in general, but beyond that, we're talking about phones being plugged into your network, and that's really all you need. No voicemail system, no other hardware in your back wiring closet. That's one aspect. The other one is integration with existing systems. It's very convenient now to have a phone next to your desk, pick up your phone, and then have it or have your PC integrate with the phone, where you can double-click a link and have it call a phone number for you through your phone. The phone hardware itself is actually independent. You don't really need it. You know, much like for a presentation or a Skype conversation, you can use your PC speaker and microphone. That can substitute for a traditional phone. You can also route calls very easily to your cell phones. You can link up a contact list on your phone to a Microsoft Exchange environment. So you can have an entire populated, always up-to-date address book on your phone for your company. That would be the quick summary here.
Here's another question. This one's from Mike. Can I move my accounting package to the server in the cloud? And I'll start out maybe, Andy, with this answer to this question. Yeah, certainly. I think that's one of the things that people are most nervous about, is getting private, company, sensitive company information out there in the cloud. We've seen a number of vendors step up, including Intuit, that offers, in essence, their same accounting packages through a cloud provider, fully secure, fully encrypted. And I think there are a lot of options for companies to do that. Again, just based on your level of comfort with the security models built around those packages, it's ultimately your decision if you want to keep that in-house, just secure, locked away in the boss's office, or if you want to explore those options, we certainly can help in terms of consulting on best options for you there. Andy?
You said it really well. Yeah.
Here's another question coming in from Tim. Okay, where's a good place to start? You mentioned backups. Would that be a good place to think about experimenting or testing out some of these cloud services and see?
Right.
It implies see if it's cheaper, faster, better, cheaper.
What we've seen in the past is people often come to us with hosted email, not hosted email, cloud-based email solutions. And that is generally our beginning of the conversation, just because that's been the most popular method to start moving services online. We found that that generally leads to other conversations saying, well, you know, the way you're storing data, we could expand that and have your cloud-based email handle more aspects. Well, except for this particular aspect, we have a file storage solution. And if we're talking about file and email, generally, for a lot of SMBs, we're then talking about getting rid of a server, whether it's their primary server or additional application servers. We can, and that leads to the cloud conversation. We've had other clients where office moves are a convenient starting point for this conversation. Since you're going to re-swizzle every physical aspect of your office, that's a good opportunity to start consolidating what the after picture looks like. And depending on the office, cloud solutions have been very convenient, because think again of a cloud solution. If you're not tied to any particular office, we can then say, all right, do your move, and you're going to plug your equipment into your new environment, and it'll just work. It knows already where to go for the cloud service. We don't need to deal with a lot of after move configuration issues. So there's been a lot of entrances into that conversation for cloud offerings, but that's what we've been seeing at this point.
Just a question here. So you've mentioned Microsoft. What are some of the other vendors that you're working with?
Okay, so yeah, Microsoft, specifically Microsoft 365, they would be our go-to for email, cloud-based email solutions. They also have SharePoint and a more limited version of file storage as part of their offering. They have Lync for communications, which also gets us into the chatting and voice integration that we spoke about earlier. Mm-hmm. We have other vendors like eFolder and Anchor, which are the preferred vendors, partner vendors for file storage and file synchronization aspects. We also work with the bigger guns, locally US Signal, for more complex, larger environments. They are a partner with us. And outside of our city itself, we can go even higher and talk about Microsoft expanded services for their Azure program, which is cloud-based servers, cloud-based Active Directory, Amazon for similar solutions, and 8x8. That's number 8, X number 8 for cloud-based phone solutions. So we're not really hiding anything here in terms of who are we, what are our vendors. We're not rebranding that information because we believe our value is such that we bring the experience in terms of implementation to the table.
Another question here relates to that. What about Apple? And absolutely, we are certified Apple integration specialists, one of only a few in the region, but in terms of incorporating iPad and MacBooks and iPhones, we're absolutely willing to talk to you about how we integrate those types of devices into some of your core business infrastructure. Some Apple solutions, some non-Apple solutions, but getting all this stuff to work together and play well together in the sandbox. That's the goal, and that's some of the value we provide our experience in those areas.
Yeah. From a techie back-end perspective, it is pretty exciting to actually see Apple devices play well with Android devices, to play well with Microsoft devices in terms of the handheld unit. We can, for example, have a file storage solutions for clients where they have their entire file system stored online so that PCs can access it, as well as Macs, as well as iPads, and as well as Android devices. And it's pretty cool to see people on the field using it in that aspect for both file access and file editing.
It looks like that's all the questions right now.
Oh, here's one just came right in from Todd.
Okay, Todd says, so we currently have 2 T1 lines and data and voice over IP, and we'd like to be able to eliminate them, yeah.
Okay.
What would the requirements be?
Sure. Yep. What would the ISP requirements be if we were a complete cloud-based office? So you're talking 2 Ts. I have another client in a similar situation, and you're splitting it between data and voice over IP, okay? The answer is, in terms of eliminating lines, yes, that would be one of the solutions. We would want to get rid of one of the lines, but put in QoS, or quality of service, in place for your existing network, so that we can make sure that the phone traffic gets priority over data traffic. And however, if we're talking 2 Ts, we'll really then have to say, if we're talking about a T, 1.5 megs is not very fast, and we need to do some math based on your average file size, how much data you're storing, and how many users are going to be pushing this data, upline. Okay, so you're saying you have a 3 meg line currently. That's, in my opinion, that's pretty slow. It's not very slow. I'm saying the word pretty because it could be worse in terms of pushing your data offline, or pushing your data to the cloud. But think of it as if we have, for example, a file-based solution. If we're saying, we could get rid of your server and just do file synchronization and put your files on the cloud. 3 megs is not unreasonable unless you're starting to talk about pushing larger files. Meaning, if you're creating large files on demand and then someone else needs those files quickly. If you're working more with Microsoft Office documents, Excel and Word, and those generally not only don't get that big, but they compress pretty well too. The solutions that we have are incremental based, meaning if you make a change to the file, it uploads that change. It does not upload the entire, doesn't re-upload an entire file. So it's intelligent enough to just take what only needs to be updated and pushed out to everyone. Okay, but just realize that the more data you're pushing, the more you're going to strain that 3 meg line. So we don't, off the top of my head, I can say that, yeah, that would work, but I'm not comfortable saying, move to it without doing, again, some math to make sure that the amount of data you're pushing is an appropriate amount.
Okay.
Any others?
Complex issue there, and internet availability by vendor. Not all areas have full access to alternate ISPs. So again, that's one of the things that we've been working with customers in Michigan over the last 2-3 years to address these specific issues. The primary ISP and the redundant ISP, because it is critical that you have access to this information in the cloud at all times. And I think that's all the questions we have today.
Thanks everyone for your time. Again, email cloud@i3bus.com if you would like this presentation and the notes. Otherwise, again, thank you very much, and signing off right now.